What's going on here is much more complex than that.
Can we skip this? Like, hit the skip button or something?
Oh, you don't want to skip this.
Yes, we do.
Hello there, Sir from 17 once again. This is my South Park Stick of Truth hardcore video walkthrough. We're going to... is it Clive's house? I think it might be Craig's actually. It could be, even though in my country we say Craig, but in America it's Craig. And Skeeter's bar are the two places we're going to be visiting. We're not going to be able to get Clive, I believe it is, or Craig. It'll tell me on the screen and I'll be able to tell you who we're going for. They both wear blue and they look similar, I think. But this is a fight along the way, and because this guide is going to be very short, I'm going to leave most of the fight in, and I'm going to try and explain for the most what I'm doing and how I'm setting up. Because there's a couple of stipulations on the playthrough that you might notice if you're experienced with the game. The first one, as I've mentioned, is I will not be letting anybody in my team die throughout the duration of the game. The achievement itself says, do not finish a battle with somebody knocked out, but I didn't want to trust it, so instead I'm just not going to let them be knocked out, and whenever they were in the recording, I would reload the game. So that's what is going to happen, and you're not going to see anybody get knocked out, so... And the achievement itself is only a small one, but it's a fun one to try for, especially on hardcore, because the enemies at times can do considerable damage. And the second stipulation is, to make the game a little bit more challenging, to make this a little bit more enjoyable to watch, I decided not to put any upgrades on my armor. So when I got hit, I would get hit for the highest value. But what happened is, even having played this game twice and done that 2 times, when I went afterwards, after I'd recorded this, to look at what the upgrades did, none of them seemed to have anything to do with defense. So by me not equipping them, the only thing I seem to have done is gimped my attack, which is kind of annoying, because I thought I was doing something that might help people, and it turns out I was just not helping myself. So if you notice that I put upgrades on my weapons, but I don't do them on the equipment or my armor, it's mainly because I thought I was making it so that the game hit me the hardest and made it, the most devilishly tricky. And it does have to be said, guys, on my first playthrough of this game, I failed a handful of times, but for the most, it was always in scenarios where I got insta-killed by something, where something hit me multiple times, and even though I perfectly blocked them, I still died. But aside from that, I didn't really die too much, and it's not that challenging of a game, but that doesn't matter, it's still fun, and that really does matter. Would I be against them adding an extra difficulty? I wouldn't at all, because I just... I already want to play this again, and I've beat it twice. I want to do everything, I want to find everything, because there's so many people I haven't found, and I'm curious if they're in the game. Namely, Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson has to be in this game. I found Tom Cruise in the closet, I found a whole bunch of other people, and I need to find good old Mel Gibson, because he's amazing. Especially in South Park. He's ridiculous in real life, but in South Park he's amazing. So every time you kill people, you can loot the bodies. You want to press X on their bodies, or I believe square on PlayStation, so that you take everything instead of taking things individually. It will speed up the game immensely. And then from the house, we want to walk all the way up the street, so that we can go to, I think it's Craig's house. We'll soon find out. And how this game works is, there is a friend system that's governed via Facebook, which is hilarious. And the more friends you have, the more passive abilities you're able to unlock. And I'm not going to be trying to get many friends. I'm not going to go out of my way to pick them up. In fact, I'm going to avoid a ton that can easily be found. And the reason for this is I just want to get through the game as quickly as possible for the people wanting to do that. And I think we can all agree that this is a game that isn't really designed to be done that way, to be played that way. This is a game that's meant to be savoured, because it's fantastic and it's hilarious, which helps. But the first thing I recommend, if you're on your first playthrough and you're wanting to get as much out of it as you can, just explore the town, try to learn it, even though it is quite tricky to get everything down, because essentially you're just moving left to right the entire time. And while a lot of it is familiar if you watch the show, the way it links together is not quite as familiar. But now that we've talked to the guy's dad and we found out that he's in detention, I'm going to be moving over here towards Skeeter's bar, and we're going to pass City Hall. And at City Hall, Annie is being attacked by these bullies because she's got a Justin Bieber doll. So we're going to intervene here, and we're going to have a nice little combat section. And there are no more tutorials for the most now. You're able to fight whichever way you choose to, which to me generally involves using stun. So Mug is a fantastic ability for the Thief, because what it does is it allows you to stun enemies. Certain enemies are immune. It will tell you before you do it if they're immune. And what that does is it incapacitates them from attacking you. And when you're playing on hardcore, if 3 enemies attack one person, they will generally kill them, even if you perfectly block. It just, you know, the game stacks the damage really quickly, as you're going to see throughout this guide. And one of the interesting parts of it is you can still lose 80% of your life, even when you perfectly guard an attack, which I kind of disagree with, but at the same time it keeps the game interesting. Because I really like the notion of if you guard and you learn how to do it, you don't take damage. And it would have been nice to try and do something like a no damage playthrough, which I would have loved attempting, but as it stands, I don't think there's any way you can do that, because even at level 15, which is the level cap, you still aren't strong enough to shitface everything, so I just don't think that's possible. But now that we've done that, Annie's our friend. We get a little bit of experience as we carry on up the street. And you might be wondering why we're going towards Skeeter's bar, because it isn't a main objective. But what we're doing is we're going to do a side mission of killing some rats in the tavern. You know, now, Skeeter, you ain't doing nothing wrong. Place from the show. And we're going to get a dart, a throwing dart, which is a thrown weapon. And the Thief class specialises in bleed, pretty much. And what I'm going to be doing as far as combat, it also allows us to pick up the gas mask here for Tolkien, because we're going to need that for the token black guy side quest. So, going to the equipment, buy the gas mask, because you're going to need it to get past the move along guard who loves to pepper spray people. But here's Skeeter's bar. But anyhow, bleeding. The dart is a weapon that throws numerous times if you time it correctly, and if you put on some modifiers, you can get advanced bleeding really quickly, and it'll allow you to get people's bleed up to ×5, and then from that point onwards, you can essentially let them kill themselves, because that's what they'll do. Every turn that passes while they have bleed in effect, it'll do passive damage, and it's massive damage that stacks, and it also stacks on top of some of the abilities. So the strategies in fights as the Thief and in this guide are going to be to stack bleed, to damage them, and then every so often do things like fire, do things like gross out. It all depends on what we have access to. The best setup that we're going to be using is essentially a bleed building throwing weapon that has fire on it to give 2 status effects at the same time. And then from that point, every single piece of equipment I'm going to try and get, which I'm not going to get too many, it's just a pair of gloves, which are called the Monk's Gloves, which are available at level 10, which is going to increase our thrown damage. And a couple of the passive abilities we're going to increase to help bleed and help throwing weapons. And all we're going to be doing is throwing stuff at people and then backstabbing them. And, yeah, pretty simple stuff. But here are the rats, sorry. A good technique to get into, to getting an advantage in combat, is to shoot with your bow or whatever your thrown item is at an enemy before you engage them. And then when you attack them and you get first turn, one of them will be stunned. And then from that point, you can divide and conquer. The less enemies fighting you at one given time, the better chance you're going to stand. But here is the Hammer of Stones by Butters. You're going to see me doing this a lot. It's a cool move, it's kind of easy to do, and it hits 2 enemies on a row, and it's going to be your multitasking ability. Early on, I'm going to be using the bow because it does a multiple hit, depending on what you press, because obviously you can press A, you can press X, and when you get access to mana later on, you can also fart, which I don't really understand the farts. They seem really powerful, but the game doesn't refill your mana, so you have to use items to keep using them, and everything else is powerful too, so I just never really needed them. You're not going to see me farting too much at all. Something that the game does utilise really well, and it's included with the farts. I know this is a hilarious and ridiculous tangent, but farting is prevalent in this game, and it's legit, man. It really is. But there are certain encounters where you can do things to the environment that will kill the enemies before you fight them and give you experience. And I'm going to try to do as many of those as I can, just to show people, you know, the wide variety of ways to avoid combat, but it speeds up the game too. So I'm going to try and do as many as I can. If I don't, I'll probably have a good reason, or it might be just one that I've not discovered or I've not noticed. But a couple of things with the standard melee hit. Depending on how many hits your weapon has will depend on how many times you can attack if you time it right. If you mistime it, you won't attack. You can literally not attack, and sometimes it's not your fault when that happens, because you might have pressed it eagerly, or you were a little bit early, and it stops you from being able to attack completely. Or on other animations, it allows you to attack after a mistake, and you don't realise that you can, so you just stand there like an idiot. So, you know, a lot of the combat is all about awareness and knowing what happens when you make mistakes. And I didn't cock up that much on my first playthrough, so I didn't know that you could still attack when you missed them, which was weird.
Feel my righteous fury.
But on the normal attack, I always tried to see what the mechanics are like and how they're handled. So on a 3-hitter, I tried doing 2 light hits with A and then finishing with X, which you're going to see me do quite a lot. And my thought was you'd get, 2 bits of cheeky damage from the A inputs and 1 big hit from the X. And the game balances this out by not giving you as much damage from the final hit. So what it turns into is you should generally only use the A attack to do quick hits against people with armor. Because when you hit somebody with armor, regardless of how much damage you do, how damaging your spell is, how damaging whatever you're hitting them with is, it will do 1 damage and remove an armor token. So the quick hit gets rid of armor because it hits numerous times and it doesn't matter about damage. I've said that wrong, sorry. It gets rid of shield. Shield is the thing that completely neutralizes attacks. Armor's slightly different. Armor is a factor that decreases your damage that you do, and it's also a number that you can decrease if you have the right abilities. So shield neutralizes all damage. You do 1 until you remove it all. Armor, slightly different. Sorry about that. But that's the end of that. We've got the dart, and now we're going to be moving on to doing the rest of the warriors that we need to collect. So thank you for watching, and you take care now.